Solo was actually pretty dang good, and if you dismissed it in 2018, you weren't judging the movie. You were just angry about the other movies. There, I said it. And if you're watching this right now, nodding along because you've been saying this for 6 years while everyone else rolled their eyes at you, this video is for you. Not the critics who've suddenly decided Solo deserves reassessment. Not the YouTube essayists who are now discovering it was underrated all along. You, the ones who walked out of that theater on May 25th, 2018, grinning like idiots because you just watched a genuinely fun Star Wars movie, only to spend the next month defending it to people who hadn't even seen it. You were right. You were always right, and I'm going to prove it. But here's the thing. Solo's story isn't just about one movie getting a raw deal. It's about a pattern. A predictable, documented, exhaustingly cyclical pattern in Star Wars fandom, where we trash something in the moment, spend years piling on, and then slowly, quietly, start admitting we were wrong. The prequels went through it. The Clone Wars went through it. And Solo? Solo's going through it right now. So let's talk about what actually happened. Because the story of Solo's failure isn't a story about a bad movie. It's a story about timing, groupthink, and misplaced anger wearing a target that belonged to someone else. The Last Jedi premiered on December 15th, 2017. Whatever your feelings about that film, and I'm genuinely not here to relitigate them, you know what happened next. The fandom fractured. The discourse became toxic. Critics gave it a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, while audience scores cratered to 42%, complicated by organized review bombing campaigns that were later verified as coordinated attacks. YouTube channels dedicated to Last Jedi criticism exploded in subscriber counts. Reddit communities formed around the anger. Twitter hashtags sustained negative discourse at volumes unprecedented for a Star Wars release. Solo was scheduled for May 25th, 2018. 5 months. That's the gap. 5 months between the most divisive Star Wars movie in history and a spin-off film that had nothing to do with any of it. The anger hadn't cooled. The arguments were still fresh. Luke Skywalker's characterization was still being debated in every comment section on the internet. And Solo walked directly into the crossfire. Here's what the box office numbers actually tell us. Solo opened to $84.4 million domestically. For literally any other franchise, that's a success. But against Star Wars benchmarks, Rogue One's $155 million opening, The Last Jedi's $220 million debut, it registered as catastrophic. Final domestic gross hit $213 million. Worldwide earnings reached $393 million. Against production costs reported between $275 and $300 million, elevated by documented director changes mid-production, plus marketing expenditures estimated above $150 million, Solo became the first Star Wars film of the Disney era to generate a reported loss. The Solo failed narrative was born, and it stuck. But here's what that narrative conveniently ignores. The boycotts were organized, documented, and explicitly stated. Social media archives from spring 2018 show hashtag boycott Solo trending in the months before release. Participants weren't quiet about their motivations. They said, openly, publicly, in their own words, that they intended to punish Lucasfilm for The Last Jedi. Not for anything Solo did. Not for Alden Ehrenreich's casting. Not for the director changes. For The Last Jedi. Solo was collateral damage in a war it never signed up for. And the timing made it worse. Solo released in the same frame as Deadpool 2, 2 weeks after Avengers: Infinity War was still dominating screens. The compressed window that put a Star Wars movie in May instead of December, breaking years of franchise convention, guaranteed it would compete against other blockbusters instead of owning its release date. Industry analysts had warned about franchise fatigue before the film opened. Trade publications questioned whether audiences exhausted by Last Jedi discourse would return to theaters so quickly. They didn't. Not because Solo was bad, because the moment was impossible. So let's talk about what the movie actually was. Because somewhere in all that noise, people missed that Solo contained one of the best action sequences in Star Wars history. The Convex train heist, where Han, Chewie, and Beckett's crew attempt to rob coaxium fuel from an elevated transport threading through mountain peaks, drew comparisons to classic Western train robberies for a reason. Real snow, practical explosions, stunt performers in genuine peril on rigs and cables. The tactile, physical filmmaking that Star Wars fans had been begging for since the prequel era's heavy digital work. When the Cloud Riders attack and the whole operation goes sideways, the spatial clarity of that sequence lets you track every beat, every choice, everything going wrong. It wasn't just competent action, it was exceptional action. And it established Solo's genre identity, space western crime film, in a way that distinguished it from the saga's mythological register. Here's where I need to address the elephant, the Alden Ehrenreich of it all. The casting announcement came July 17, 2016, at Star Wars Celebration Europe. Ehrenreich had garnered industry attention through Hail Caesar earlier that year. The Coen brothers had given him a showcase role as Hobie Doyle that demonstrated genuine screen presence. Steven Spielberg reportedly recommended him to Kathleen Kennedy. The casting search had involved thousands of candidates over 6 months. None of that mattered to the discourse. Forum discussions and social media commentary from July 2016 reveal the same concern repeated endlessly. Han Solo was uncastable. Harrison Ford's persona was inseparable from the character. Anyone would suffer in comparison. They were wrong. What Ehrenreich did, and what critics who actually watched the film recognized, wasn't imitation. He didn't try to be Harrison Ford. He played Han Solo at a younger, more vulnerable stage. A kid from Corellia with dreams bigger than his circumstances. Swagger that hadn't yet calcified into cynicism. The person who would become the man we meet in the Mos Eisley Cantina, but who wasn't there yet. Harrison Ford himself, when asked about the casting, offered measured endorsement. He expressed confidence in the production team and acknowledged meeting Ehrenreich, describing him as talented. Not the enthusiastic blessing some fans hoped for, but far from dismissal. And when you watch Ehrenreich opposite Donald Glover's Lando, their chemistry, their friendship-rivalry dynamic, the way they sell a relationship that spans the entire original trilogy without a single forced callback, you realize that Solo's casting was never the problem. The casting was, in fact, exactly right. But the movie did something else that its detractors missed entirely. Something that actually earned its narrative twist instead of generating controversy for shock value. Enfys Nest. Throughout the film, Enfys functions as an antagonist, masked marauder, leader of the Cloud Riders, the threat that keeps derailing Beckett's crew. Standard villain stuff. Then comes the third act reveal. Enfys removes her helmet to reveal a young woman barely beyond adolescence. The Cloud Riders aren't criminal opportunists. They're proto-rebellion, fighting the Empire and its syndicate allies with whatever resources they can scrape together. The coaxium fuel that drives the entire plot? Enfys wants it to fund resistance against the same forces Han has been working alongside. Her mask was inherited from her mother, killed by the syndicates. The mission passed from one generation to the next. This is what subverting expectations actually looks like when it's earned. Enfys's youth carries thematic weight. The revelation that rebellion begins not with generals and senators, but with desperate children who've lost everything, challenges the clean heroism of the saga films. And the choice Han faces, personal profit versus collective resistance, functions as origin point storytelling for the tension between cynicism and idealism that would define his character through A New Hope and beyond. Solo had things to say, real things, about who becomes a rebel and why. And then there's the Maul scene. This is where the movie's complicated relationship with the broader franchise became a feature rather than a bug, for those who understood it. When Kira betrays Han and contacts her Crimson Dawn superior, the hologram reveals Darth Maul. Casual audiences were confused. Didn't he die in The Phantom Menace? Bisected and dropped down a reactor shaft? But Clone Wars and Rebels viewers knew immediately what they were seeing. Maul's survival and resurrection had been extensively documented across 7 seasons of animated storytelling, where he returned as a vengeful, half-mechanical figure who built a criminal empire spanning the galaxy's underworld. More significantly, and this is the part casual audiences completely missed, Maul's ultimate fate had already been depicted before Solo reached theaters. The Rebels episode, Twin Suns, aired in March 2017. More than a year before Solo's May 2018 release. It showed Maul's final confrontation with Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine. It showed his death. Solo wasn't setting up Maul's future. It was filling in his past. For animated fans, this was a thrilling bridge between mediums, a reward for years of investment in the expanded narrative. For casual viewers, it registered as confusing sequel bait. That divide illustrated Solo's fundamental challenge, serving both audiences while the franchise's storytelling remained fractured across platforms. And here's where we have to talk about what we lost. Because the Maul scene, Kira's betrayal, the Crimson Dawn structure, these were sequel hooks. Ehrenreich reportedly signed a multi-picture deal. The crime saga that Solo's ending appeared to establish, what could have been Star Wars' version of a gangster epic, with Ehrenreich, Emilia Clarke, and Glover returning for subsequent chapters, closed before it could begin. Kira's story continued in comics and novels. The War of the Bounty Hunters crossover event picked up threads, but those reached smaller audiences than theatrical releases or even Disney Plus series would command. We lost stories, real stories, because of displaced anger at a different movie. Now here's the part nobody's talking about enough. The Mandalorian Season 3. Moff Gideon's cloning facility. The implications that stared us right in the face while everyone was busy complaining about the show's pacing. Remember the setup? Grogu's blood, Dr. Pershing's experiments, the tank that looked suspiciously like where Snoke clones were grown, the Praetorian guards that shouldn't exist unless someone was rebuilding infrastructure from Palpatine's contingency plans. What if the Mandalorian already explained, somehow Palpatine returned? Not explicitly, not in a way that handed you the answers, but the pieces are there if you're willing to connect them. Gideon wasn't operating alone. His cloning experiments with Force-sensitive blood fit exactly into the framework that would eventually produce the Palpatine we see in The Rise of Skywalker. The show didn't just casually gesture at this. It built an entire season around the infrastructure of Imperial cloning remnants trying to create Force-sensitive bodies. This is what happens when you dismiss Star Wars content before engaging with it. You miss the connections, the answers hiding in plain sight. The way the franchise actually does work to explain itself, just not in the places you expect or the timelines you demand. Solo defenders knew this instinctively. They'd learned not to trust initial reactions, not to trust the discourse, to give Star Wars time to reveal its connective tissue. Because we'd seen this before. The prequels taught us. May 19th, 1999. The Phantom Menace premieres, and the critical consensus forms immediately. Jar Jar Binks becomes a punchline. Jake Lloyd's performance draws mockery. Trade disputes and Senate procedures seem incongruous with Star Wars adventure. The backlash becomes the story. Attack of the Clones in 2002, Revenge of the Sith in 2005, each receiving mixed to negative fan response that calcified into conventional wisdom. George Lucas had diminished his own creation. I Don't Like Sand became evidence of failure rather than a line read. That consensus persisted through the late 2000s and into the early 2000s. Prequel mockery functioned as a marker of true Star Wars fandom in online spaces. Then something shifted. Around 2014-2015, correlating with the coming of age of viewers who'd been 7 to 12 years old when The Phantom Menace premiered, the rehabilitation began. This generation reached their 20s. They started asserting their nostalgia. Social media analysis from this period shows prequel defense posts increasing, appreciation threads gaining traction, and prequel memes emerging as initially ironic content that transformed into genuine affection. I Have the High Ground shifted in cultural meaning from criticism to iconic moment.
By 2016, mainstream entertainment publications were noting the prequel rehabilitation as a documented phenomenon. Critics acknowledged the trilogy's ambition in world-building, its political allegory, the tragic arc of Anakin's fall. The prequels didn't need fixing. They never needed fixing. They needed time. The Clone Wars went through the same cycle. October 3rd, 2008. The show premieres to dismissive coverage from adult fans who characterize it as children's programming. Ahsoka Tano gets introduced, and segments of the fandom reject her as a character designed for younger audiences. Forums from 2008 to 2010 document this reception exhaustively. The show runs through 2014.
Somewhere in there, the Umbara arc happens. The Darth Maul resurrection storyline happens. The Wrong Jedi arc happens. And gradually, quietly, the critical consensus inverts. By the time the series was cancelled in 2013 and revived for a final season on Disney Plus in 2020, the Clone Wars had transformed in fan discourse from dismissed kids' show to the standard against which other Star Wars content gets measured. Ahsoka Tano and Captain Rex achieved iconic status. The fans who defended Clone Wars from the beginning were vindicated, like they always are, eventually. Solo's rehabilitation followed the same trajectory, just compressed. On May 23, 2019, almost exactly 1 year after release, hashtag #MakeSolo2Happen trended worldwide on Twitter. Fans who defended the film from opening weekend found new converts who discovered it through home media and streaming. John Kasdan, who co-wrote the screenplay with his father Lawrence Kasdan, engaged actively with the campaign, expressing support for continuation. The movement repeated annually. Ron Howard acknowledged it. The demands evolved: theatrical sequel, Disney Plus series, continuation through Donald Glover's rumored Lando project. What distinguished hashtag #MakeSolo2Happen wasn't nostalgia. It was organized persistence. Sustained, coordinated movements with creator engagement don't happen for movies people merely tolerate. They happen for movies people love. When Disney Plus launched in November 2019, streaming availability exposed Solo to audiences who hadn't seen it theatrically: the boycotters, the fatigued, the simply disinterested. Social media analysis from 2020 to 2021 shows increasing positive Solo content. Appreciation posts, defense threads, Solo was underrated takes gaining traction. The pandemic helped. People explored Disney Plus catalogs and discovered content they'd previously dismissed. The film found its audience. The audience it should have had from the beginning. So here's where I leave you with a question designed to start arguments in the comments. If the prequels got rehabilitated, and they did, and if Clone Wars got rehabilitated, and it did, and if Solo is getting rehabilitated right now, which it is, then what about the sequel trilogy? What about The Rise of Skywalker? Somehow Palpatine Returned has become such a meme, such shorthand for perceived franchise failure, that suggesting it might ever achieve rehabilitation feels like heresy. The critical consensus on TROS feels permanent in a way the prequel consensus once felt permanent. But we've been here before, multiple times. Maybe in 10 years, we're having the same conversation about Rey Palpatine. Maybe the generation that was 7 years old when The Force Awakens came out will assert their nostalgia the way prequel kids did. Maybe the Moff Gideon cloning explanation will become accepted canon that retroactively makes the Palpatine return make sense. Or maybe TROS is the one that actually deserves the rejection. Maybe the pattern breaks. I genuinely don't know. But I do know this: Solo was always good. The Conveyex heist was always one of the best action sequences in the franchise. Alden Ehrenreich's performance was always the right choice. Enfys Nest's reveal always carried thematic weight that earned its subversion. The Maul scene always rewarded the viewers who'd been paying attention to the animated series. If you defended Solo in 2018 while everyone else piled on, you weren't wrong. You weren't contrarian. You weren't blinded by fandom loyalty. You saw it clearly. Everyone else was just too angry to look. Welcome to vindication. You earned it. Subscribe for more stories like this.